Hello everyone. So this Project 5 side-scrolling platformer. This first video I'm going to talk about getting the character to move left and right and jump using Playmaker and physics, which means no translates or iTweens or anything like that, or any kind of set positioning, because we want physics to control how our player interacts in this world. So let's jump right into it. Over here in Unity, I have a empty scene except for a gray material that I keep for keeping the white down, and Playmaker is already installed. Just a main camera and a directional light. So the first thing I'm going to do is make some ground for our character to run on. I'm going to set the ground to 0 and minus 0.5 in Y, and that way the actual grid 0 is the top of this cube. But 0 in X, 0 in Z. Scale in 15 in X, and we'll say 4 in Z. And that's because of the depth. I don't really need to be too deep. I want my character running left and right on X, and up and down to be Y. So that's cool. Let's name this while we're at it. Ground. We could even tag it while we're at it if we want. Ground. Maybe that'll be useful later. Next, let's make ourselves a 3D object capsule as our player, and we'll set this to 0 and then 1.10. That way it's in the middle of our grid this way and this way, but just above the ground in height. Okay, let's name that too. We'll call it player. We can even tag it while we're at it if we'd like, player. And since I want physics to work on this guy, we need to add a component, physics rigid body component. And like I said a second ago, I don't need it to move in Z, so I'm going to lock the translate value of Z. X and Y, I want it to move left and right in X and up and down in Y, so I'm going to leave those. And for now I'm going to freeze the rotations too, because I don't want it rotating forward and falling on its face or something like that. And that should be good. Leave the rest of this alone for now. So our character's essentially ready to go. We just need to tell it how to move. One last thing. Let's darken these bright whites down a little bit. Nice. Alright, so this guy, our character, in our Playmaker editor, let's add an FSM. And we're going to call this FSM the player move. FSM would be fine. And our state one, we're going to use a KeyListener because it's going to be based on key input, and we could have it checking for a key and then jumping to a state to do something and then jumping back, and then it gets confused between states sometimes. So it's better to have it just stay within one state if it can. And this actually is pretty simple in this case. So we're still going to use a get access, which is pretty standard for this sort of thing. And if you don't remember, up here in our edit project settings input, we have these default inputs that Unity is looking for, and horizontal is one of them. And so that's the one that we're going to have this look for. So I'm going to say on my player, inside this key listener, the axis I want it watching for is the horizontal axis. And then I need to store that input. So I'm going to store it in a variable called the H axis. And remember, this is a variable name, so it's good to keep spaces out of them, underscores or camel case. And so now you'll notice if I hit play, if you've got debug checked, you can see this value. And if I press A or D on the keyboard, you'll see that yes, indeed, I am getting a number inputting there. And if I hit the left or right arrow, yes, indeed, I'm also getting some input. And you'll notice that if I scroll up to say 1, it doesn't instantly snap to 0. It takes a second. And that's because in the input settings, so if we go to the, excuse me, not those. If we go to the project settings to where those inputs are, for the horizontal, we've got this gravity. And so that determines how fast it's going to snap to and from 1 and 0. Okay. Let's go back to our player. Our player, we get access. Now we basically want that to happen every frame. we're always watching for this. And then we just need to do something. So instead of saying move to or translate or something, we want to stay within physics. We don't want to continually add force because that would just make the character go faster and faster and faster. What we basically want to do is set its velocity. Now velocity, as opposed to setting its position, this is just saying you're currently moving this fast. And so if I set it to a value of 1 every second, in this case, it would say, hey, you're moving by a value of 1 every second. And if you let off, then it's going to slowly just decelerate by whatever our gravity 0 to 1 value is. So here, this set velocity, I'm going to do it on the owner. The velocity that I want to be playing with is the x. I want its left and right. So I'm going to input the variable that we're storing here in this input, so plus or minus value. And I want this to happen every frame as well. And if I want to test it, we'll hit play real quick. And you'll see that yes, it's working, but our character is super slow, and that's because right here our maximum left or right value is -1 and +1. And so our maximum velocity is -1 and +1. So like many other times in the get access situation, we're going to use this multiplier as our speed. And so now instead of a maximum of 1, we're getting a maximum of 10. Or if that's too fast, you can slow it down, or if it's too slow, you could speed it up. Now, what we can do with this is then set this multiplier up if you hold shift, so that we get a run or something like that. Alright, so cool. Our character is basically moving left and right. Let's get it jumping. For the same reason that we don't want to have this state jumping in and out of too many states, because we're not trying to get it to constrain, we want it to always be doing that. Let's add a whole new FSM for the jump. And we will call this the player jump FSM. And in state 1, we'll have this be another key listener. And the action I'm going to use for the key this time is a get key down, because I just want to wait until, say, I hit spacebar. That's the button I'm going to use for this, spacebar. When I hit spacebar, I want you to do something. In this case, I want it to jump. So let's tell it to send a message, send an event called send jump. And it says, hey, you're not using this. So if I click on it, it'll add it. And I need a state for this to go to. So let's add another state. It says, hey, when spacebar's been pressed, send the jump message to this state over here. And we'll call this state jumping. Now, unless I just want this to happen once and never happen again, I need a way for this to loop. So for testing reasons, if nothing else, let's add a finished state so that it loops from here to here. And if I hit play and test, it's hanging out. If I hit the space bar, you'll see it jumps over, it turns green, and jumps back. Awesome. So let's make it jump. Now again, since we want to stay within the physics engine, this time we are going to add force, because we want it to be like a burst of force that happens upward on the character. So I'm going to add force in the jump state, and I want it to happen on the owner. And then what direction? So basically I could input a variable here. So if I wanted to press and hold the space bar to build up, I could have that calculated into a variable and then outputting an exponential number if I chose. For a single jump, I'm just going to click on the constants button, and this is where we're going to input a number. Positive value means up, negative value would mean down. I'm going to set this number really big, and the reason is, in my edit project settings physics section, instead of having my gravity set to -9.81, I believe it normally is, I have it set to -30, and the reason for that is when the character jumps under regular gravity, it feels like it takes a while to come down, and sometimes that just isn't really fun or interactive for the player, the user. And so by setting this up, you get a little more Mario feel where the character hops quick and comes back down to the ground faster. But what that means is we need more force to get it off the ground. So let's just double check our thing again. So we're listening for the space bar. If it gets hit, we send the message send jump over here, and we're going to add 600 units of force, and then this force mode. we could set to different kinds of force. There's more information on this stuff at the Unity website if you're interested in how this is calculated. And we're going to stay in world space, and let's test. Alright, so now I can move, and if I move, I can jump. Wow, that's awesome. And I get kind of a quick response back to the ground because my gravity is set low. Now, there's two problems. One, my camera doesn't follow my character, and the angle is kind of stale. And the other thing is, if I hit my spacebar multiple times, I can take off like a rocket. And the reason is that I never tell it to not do this. It's like, as long as I hit the spacebar, keep adding more force upwards. So if that's what you want is a rocket, you could totally have a rocket, but if they hit the spacebar too many times, they're going to take off, and it's going to take a while to come back down. Okay, so let's address our camera problem first, because it's really simple. We don't really want to parent this thing to our character, because that can cause weird rotational problems and so forth. So instead, what I'm going to do is add an FSM on the camera itself, and we'll call this the camera follow FSM. And state 1, I'm going to name to say following. And this is really simple to do. There's actually a command called smooth follow action. So I'm just going to add that. And then all I have to do is tell it what to follow. So if I grab our player and drag it in here, it says, hey, what do you want me to follow? Follow this thing. Awesome. Now, why this is really cool is here's our camera angle. You'll notice we've got this distance and height. So if I lower the height, yes indeed, the camera rotates down. And if I decrease the distance, camera gets close. And if I say increase the distance, the camera gets far away. So it's a really easy way to handle zooming your camera in and out with maybe a mouse wheel, or adjusting like the third person view to map if you want to like zoom out and let them look down or something like that. It's a great little command built in. I'm going to set it to say 8 and 1 should be fine. And now if I move left and right, you can see that, yep, the camera's following, and even when I jump, it moves up and down. And you can see it actually has a little bit of swing value where it takes a second to catch up. And that's this height and dampening rotation. Say I say this is to 0 and 0, we're basically going to get a 1-to-1 action. But the camera just kind of stays arbitrarily attached. So you want to leave it set a little bit up to something. Maybe 2 and 2, or 1 and 1, or I don't know, whatever makes sense to you. Okay, awesome. So now we can actually fly up in the world and the camera will follow us, so that's cool. But let's get it so that we can't just fly up in the world. Let's have the player in our jump FSM here. We need it to check in the middle. We need it to check for something. Either I'm touching something that's called ground, or that there's an object that I'm standing on, but we need some sort of check here in between. So I'm going to add another state. And instead of having this first key listener jump all the way to the jump command, I'm going to say, hey, send the jump command, but before, jump to state here, and we're going to have this be called check for ground. And there's a bunch of ways you could do this with colliders, or excuse me, collision events and so forth, but they're going to be running more often than necessary, and they're kind of not always reliable. And one way that works real good is a raycast. So let's type in raycast, and what we're going to do is project from object. So in the case of a raycast, what it's saying is right here, this center point, that's where we're going to be projecting from. And the direction, I want not necessarily a variable in this case, but it could be. This time I just want to put in a constant. -1 means down. Now distance, this is Unity units again. So if this character is 2 units tall, then from here to the bottom is 1 unit. So this is going to shoot 99 units past through this ground, which would be a way to maybe constrain a rocket to a rocket like pack to like a certain height or something. but we don't want to shoot that far. We just want to shoot from here to the bottom. And so I'm going to set it to 1. That's going to be exact. If that's too sensitive, you can up that to 1.01 or 1.1 or something. But this should work since my ground is perfectly flat. And then I need to say what's going to happen when we get hit. So I'm going to reuse this send jump. You can use it a bunch of times if you want. So if we hit the spacebar, send, hey, send jump. It comes over here and say, okay, check for the ground. And if we hit some ground, say, cool, come over here and you can jump. Now, one more thing we got to take care of is this repeat interval. Repeat interval of 1 means every single frame. Repeat interval of 2 means every other frame, and so forth. So we actually want a repeat interval of 0. We don't want it to keep running this ground check. And we want this space to be set to world. So it's going to shoot from the middle, down 1, world space, exactly that far. Never going to repeat. If it hits the ground, it's going to let us jump. It's going to use this much force to push us in the air. And then it's going to come back here and wait to see if we can hit the spacebar again. So let's test it out and see if it works. Alright, so here we are running back and forth. If I hit spacebar, you can see down here that it's responding the ground check and going through. And if I hit spacebar a bunch of times in the air, I can actually get it to glitch. Now, what happened here, guys? What happened was I didn't get leave it away back out if it didn't hit the ground. So we need to add one more piece, and we just need to add something even as simple as just another finished, so that this one can talk to this one. This one, if it gets a confirmation, can talk to this one, and if it gets a negative, it can say go back over here. And so now if we test it again, we should be good. We should be able to run back and forth. We should be able to jump. And if I hit the spacebar multiple times, it should not allow me to jump again until I touch the ground. And this is actually a pretty responsive little jump that you get too, which is nice. If you want to be able to jump, maybe double jump or something, you would want to have this check and then have it check a variable that says maybe I get 1 extra jump, or maybe I get 2 extra jumps, or so forth. Okay, so that's how to get the character to move. That's how to get the character to jump, and how to also not get it to take off like a rocket. Hope that's helpful. In the next video to come, I'll talk about setting up the kill zone for it and getting the character to reset. Alright, until then, have a good one.